Hello, welcome to another digital marketing strategy podcast hosted by Exposure Ninja. This week we're going to be talking about brand marketing, not specifically brand strategy, although that's going to play into it a little bit as well. But what we're talking about is how you can do it in a kind of perfect way, a very impactful way this year. And to do so, you're going to need to tackle three things and do them as perfectly as you can. That's going to be branding, your positioning, and your marketing. So putting that amplifier behind everything that you're doing. That's going to help you really cut through the noise with a market that can be pretty busy, and with AI helping people to put a lot more marketing out there. There's a lot more social posts going out there. There's a lot more videos because they're becoming easy to do. You need to know how to do it in a superbly perfect way so that you resonate and then capture the audience where they are with the right message at the right time. I'm joined this week by Charlie Marchant, CEO of Exposure Ninja. Hi, Charlie. How you doing?
Hey, Dale. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm tip top. I'm doing really well. I'm actually really excited about this one because we were talking just beforehand. We do have an awful lot to say about this because the impact, as I'm sure you'll feel as well, is massive if you can get your positioning right.
Oh, massively so. I'm really excited to talk about this.
Let's get into it then. So I want to have a little bit of a recap possibly on where we are with brand marketing as we are now in the second month of February, but perhaps you can give us a little bit of background on how brand marketing has been over the last 12 months in 2024?
Yeah, sure. Brand marketing is a really interesting area because I think a lot of people think of brand marketing as like this massive sort of creative thing that big corporate brands do. But actually, everyone does brand marketing at some level, even if they haven't actively done it. And I think more and more, particularly last year, we saw even smaller and medium-sized businesses really realizing the importance of also thinking about their brand. And I think that's especially since COVID, we found there's so much saturation in lots of markets that perhaps used to be distinctive, and there are still markets that are distinctive, but there's also a lot of people finding like, oh my gosh, there are so many competitors in this sector that I'm working in, so many people doing the same thing, or something that was once unique, maybe a USP about your business, is less and less unique as times change and things move on. And I think 2024, we saw a lot of people thinking about that and trying to differentiate more in the way they look and the way that they sound. And I think there's been a lot of sort of big change the game kind of brands and challenger brands that have come out over the past 5 or so years that have made businesses realize, like, you know, we actually can do things differently. Even in a really saturated market, we can sound different, we can look different, we can try and do something fun or interesting or something that actually is just maybe different in their own market. And I'm talking about, I think we often think about B2C brands and all of the stuff that they can do, and the big brands like Brewdog who are doing something very different in a saturated market of what is essentially just beer. But actually it's the same for B2B brands. And I think we've seen a lot more over the past couple of years of B2B focused businesses thinking, well, how do we actually sort of humanize what we're doing? The other big trend I think we saw last year is the worry about AI, and everyone realizing that actually they want to connect on a bit of a human level. And there's almost like a bit of a backlash to, oh my goodness, we're doing so much for AI, but actually we are still marketing to humans. And I think that ultimately is really important. At the moment, we're predominantly marketing to humans and not bots. So just that, I think those are the really important things that happened probably in the last 12 months and a bit before that as well.
Anyone who's listened to any of our other marketing strategy episodes of this podcast, and we've had several, and you'll find them linked in the show notes or down below if you're watching this on YouTube or elsewhere. We've been talking about that human element, and I've probably said it before, but I always compare it to you and I came up in the marketing world via travel blogging, and how there was the comparison then between I can go to booking.com or a travel agent's website and get like, okay, this is how you can do a specific tour, explore this country or whatever. But what really connected with people is the personal approach, the individual travel blogs talking about, this is how I, as a family of 3 travel, or a solo traveler travel. This is the experience I had in Berlin or elsewhere. These are the places I would recommend, having slept with, stayed at locals' houses and gone to restaurants that they would normally visit in their neighborhood and so on. Like that worked so well then, and it's almost like the entire world is catching up to that now and putting that out there in their blog content. B2B companies are doing the same.
Absolutely. And travel blogging is like a perfect example of an industry that, well, 8-10 years ago, maybe not even that long ago, was pretty fresh. There wasn't loads of people travel blogging, and now it's probably one of the most saturated areas of blogging. It's an exact example of something that has become so saturated and so noisy, with people doing very similar things to each other. And travel blogging in that sense has evolved significantly with the advent of all types of social media and influencer and everything that's going on there. But I think it's a good example of how those markets are not as unique as they once were.
How do we deal with the saturation where there are more companies adopting this? How do we kind of contend with so much content being out there and trying not to be boring?
It's a great question. And I think a lot of it comes back to thinking about who you are. And I know that sounds a bit pie in the sky, but as a business, particularly if you're a business that delivers service and you have front-facing team members, it's you that makes up the personality of that business. And I think bringing that through in the brand is really important. And actually, hiring a team of people around you in a big business that represent the kind of values that you want to put out as a brand, that actually care about the kind of thing that you're selling. And I know that some people are thinking like, okay, I sell insurance. There's not that many people that care about insurance, but there are actually people who have the exact kind of traits that you would want in that brand. You want someone reliable, trustworthy, who cares about safety, who thinks about risk and levels that. And you can bring through all of those things of the people and the personalities you have into your business as well. So I think sometimes thinking about that, and I think there's a bit of thinking about niche over the noise. And that doesn't mean that you have to niche into the teeniest tiny segment and, back yourself into a corner. But it does mean you need to think about, like, I'm not going after everyone, or who is my predominant customer here that is going to be the most impactful for my business to meet where they are, for my business to actually market towards. And I think in 2025, we're going to see more competition, I have to say, with branding and positioning in most markets. And I think we are going to see businesses invest more in it, particularly if they see competitors starting to roll ahead in this sector.
I saw somebody once say you should replace B2B or B2C and all these different things with H2H, which is human to human. Just remember whether you're trying to sell to somebody who's scrolling through social media, or they've been sent out with the task of sending proposals to people to get a new software they need, or a new agency to support them. At the end of the day, you communicate with the human who has a specific trouble, pain point, that needs a solution and needs some assistance, and is probably going to have a greater bond with your salesperson or whoever it is, kind of bringing that person on board. If you talk to them and understand them at a human level, like, yeah, I totally relate with you, because this is exactly what I hear from people in your position all the time, or I've been in that position too. And I remember how much of a struggle it is. That you mentioned before about niching down brand level. There's an older video from last year which is on our channel called Marketing Lessons from Insurance, Highly Successful Insurance Companies, or something like that. And that talks about how one company had split out several brands for specific segments. So there was one called Polly, which is for super moms. It's like insurance for super moms. And they understood that when we go to that market with our messaging, it has to be very much, we know how you feel, how tired you are, how much you're juggling, and so on. And that resonates a lot more. People go, oh, this company understands me far better. I'm going to pick them rather than Provident. I don't know any of the names of the insurance, Aviva, or somebody like that.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great example of someone who has thought about how they really market towards a certain kind of customer, and has actually spoken to them to understand, like, what is it that's going on in your day? Like, how is your life, and how does my business actually support that and make that better? Not just sell to you, but create something that is interesting and useful and that you actually need in your life.
One of the counterpoints that I've often seen is that people don't want to associate with their brand. I don't think of it like, I can't remember who it was, Mark Ritson, Rory Sutherland. They said, go and open your fridge and open it and tell me about how much you love the brand of Hellman's mayonnaise. Like, I am a Hellman's fanatic. Like, I'm just all about Hellman's. My entire kitchen is painted in the Hellman's colors. I'm so dedicated. Do you think that brand in that way does resonate and is still should be a priority for marketers trying to figure out how they should communicate their brand in terms of like, will people identify with it? Is it a crucial part of the culture and so on?
I think this is a little bit about how we think about the level of identification someone has with a brand. Like, I think it's very unlikely that someone's going to walk around carrying a tote bag of whatever car insurance company that they go with. Like, maybe some people will, but you know what? It's probably not true. But if Patagonia sent you a tote bag, then that's the kind of brand that you might walk around with and show off, because that's, you know, you feel like that connects with other people. And I don't think that every brand can be the kind of business, the kind of brand that gets worn on a beanie or a backpack or whatever, or is, you know, tattooed as much as Harley Davidson is onto someone's arm or shoulder. But I think that you can still be, I think what you want in your customer and your consumer is them not to have like a reaction to having to buy from a brand. Like, I definitely in my life have brands that I've had to buy from that I don't love, and that I would prefer people not to know that, you know, that's whoever. And I'm stuck with that brand because there's things that you actually need in your life, like your insurance, like your mortgage, like your whatever, that you have to have. So you have to choose someone in that segment, and you're not going to be their biggest brand advocate. But there are other brands I think that I have in my life where I'm like, I would love to show off that brand. I think that's great. And I particularly feel that way about smaller, more independent challenger brands that aren't just the dominating big industry player. But I think other people will see that completely differently. Like, they feel like they're part of a big community, especially with some dominant big industry players. And so I don't think you need to think about your brand and your position in the market as like, yeah, let's paint my kitchen the color of whatever, Heinz mayonnaise. Hopefully no one is doing that. But I think you can still make that aim to be a brand that, you know, other people would recommend to their friends, that would be pleased that that's the option that they chose as the business that does whatever it is that they need within their life. And I think humans have the capacity to have like massive brain space, and even though a lot of the spaces are really noisy, there's loads of brands out there. If someone says like, oh, you know, like, where did you get that, or what brand have you chosen for that, you will know where you purchased whatever it was from, even though there's probably hundreds, if not more, brands that you've made a purchase from in the past couple of years.
Before we do continue, because I want to go into how we should go about these things in 2025 and maybe some of the challenges we can expect and how we really think that brand is going to increase in importance, and we'll get into why. I have had a question about like, what really is the difference between brand and positioning and messaging and these things and marketing? Like, is there a set descriptor for each one? How would you describe them to a marketer?
I don't know if there's a set descriptor for each one, but for me, they're distinct in the sense your brand is the way that you sound, the way that you look, the way that you show up. Your position is where you've chosen to put yourself in the market to, I'm trying to think of a different word to position, to angle yourself towards what you know that your customers are going to want, and to differentiate yourself as much as is possible from who you know are your competitors, whether that's direct or whether they're sort of slightly more tangential competitors. And marketing, I feel like, is everything that you do to then bring people into your funnel and like your brand, appreciate your positioning, and actually move through a journey to become a buyer. Hopefully that's the end result that we would all hope for at the end of it. So I think it's difficult to separate them out in the sense that they all come together and they all work together, but I think they do play distinctive purposes. And I think in digital marketing, even more so when we're thinking about websites and our online digital presence, we're thinking more about, you know, the visual images that we're actually showing someone and how we're saying things, what the text on our website says. We're thinking more about what we're offering when we're positioning, like why we're different, how someone's going to come into a website funnel, like what the CTA actually is. Are you giving them a live demo? Are you going to give them a callback? But are they going to watch a series of videos to have to understand your product, whatever that actually looks like for your business?
I think sometimes there is a bit of a mistake that marketers can make in getting too caught up in one particular area, so like spending too long on brand, too long on positioning, and too long on the marketing, and not like, okay, it's great to put a lot of time and effort, resource into the marketing part, because that's the bit that gets you in front of your audience and, you know, hopefully the entire time. But if you haven't figured out the branding bit or dedicated enough time to the positioning bit, you're going to have a real struggle. It's going to cost you way more to reach those people than if you actually did segment down, niche down, whatever you want to call it, and had a very specific message and call to action that just resonates really, really well.
I think one of my biggest fears when speaking to other marketers and thinking about what they're doing is that they would throw so much money into actual marketing. And I'm thinking about, you know, SEO, Google ads, your social marketing, all of that. And they've not actually thought about their branding and positioning at all. I mean, some people probably watching us are thinking like, why are a search marketing agency talking about branding and positioning? And we've ended up in this segment because we had so many clients come to us with great products and great services, but like no clear position of where they are in the market, not a clear offer, not a clear CTA on their website of what someone would actually get other than like a contact us. But what are they contacting you for? What's going to happen to them? What's the whole process? And if you don't have those nuts and bolts sorted first, then you can throw however much money into Google ads and it's not actually going to create an ROI for you. And those things are so important and so interconnected that I think that's why Exposure Ninja became a business that was like, we actually need to work with our clients on their positioning and where they are before we actually go into SEO and PPC. It goes beyond that, like getting great results from SEO and PPC. That also comes from having excellent positioning and a website that makes sense to the person that you are marketing to.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that sometimes this can happen to like very large businesses, like businesses that have been at it for a while. Sometimes they're so lost in the actual doing of the work that needs to be done. They're working, was it in the business, not on the business. They haven't really gone back and just like double checked, actually, does this resonate with the audience? Does this resonate with the buyer? Like, I'm so locked in that to me it all makes total sense. Like, I know, you know, of course, yeah, I get this thing and to come through here and press that button and get the next thing and then get email and booked in for a call. Great, that sounds amazing. But the actual buyers, like, none of this makes sense. Like, I don't know who that's for. Is that me? I don't know.
Yeah. And we're speaking about it as if it's a simple thing, and it's really not. And I think when you're in the business, it feels so much more complicated. I think I've used the expression before, but it's really difficult to see the wood for the trees, because especially like you're saying, it happens to big brands, and it does. You get so used to delivering what you deliver and what you know and the business that you've built and the name that you've got and the way that you look, that it's really difficult to then turn around and interrogate that. And you know it so well that it's really difficult to then imagine what someone who's seeing it for the first time or seeing it very early on in a buyer journey is actually thinking or doing, because you already know it and you can never let go of all that knowledge you have about your own business or the brand that you market for.
I believe there's a great book that I often recommend called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. No, Chip and Dan. Oh, I can't remember now. Sorry to the Chip and Dan. But it talks about something called the curse of knowledge, which is basically bad storytelling is generally people expecting that somebody knows what you're thinking about and that you're just on the same wavelength. If you go into it with the curse of knowledge, you're absolutely... Yeah, you're ruined. I'd highly recommend that book. It's very good. It's like great for like storytelling, branding, marketing generally. Highly recommend it. I do want to talk a little bit about why this is important, and that's because there are changes we were expecting in 2025 and beyond. Perhaps you can explain what we're expecting to see.
Yeah, sure. So I think brand and positioning is important in terms of, we know that digital marketing is getting more competitive for lots of businesses. We know more businesses are operating in saturated markets. So not only is their marketing hard, their actual market is difficult to compete in as well. We're going to see that more and more. We're also going to see probably the rise of more AI happening, AI agents, and actually decision making going on by AI as well. And it needs to understand what's going on the website. So there's both that human element, and there will later be, I think, more and more an AI element of it being clear and easy to understand. And then I also think we just are going to continue to see things in our societies. Consumers, for example, I think they're going to expect greater accountability from brands already. I think they do. Like if we think about some of the large businesses that were slated for funding different parts of Israel recently, I think customers do expect that accountability from the businesses that they're buying services, they're buying products from, and wanting to know where that money is going. And I think that's going to touch things like sustainability. It already does, but I think it touches things like quality, impact, the kind of initiatives that those businesses have and how they think about themselves. And then I guess the other thing I think is thinking about how people's search habits are changing and where your audience is going to be and how you're going to get to them. And I think that's going to look different for different businesses depending on what they're doing.
I imagine you've been doing a lot of research around this about the way that people are searching, and I think that there are a lot of studies out there about we can expect the Google traffic may decrease by 25 to 35 to 50% in the next 5 years. I think Gartner said it was an expected 25% decrease in organic traffic via Google for this year. You've done a lot of research around what kind of queries and platforms that people are going to. Mm-hmm. How have you seen brand appear in those circumstances when you are doing those kind of searches and doing the research, checking those platforms? Is brand coming through a lot? Is brand getting dropped out in favor of just informational responses?
Oh, it's a great question. I actually think, particularly when we're thinking about ChatGPT and a lot of the AI platforms, the brand is so important in the kinds of responses that you get, particularly if you ask anything about businesses or certain sectors, or you ask questions about, is this a good bank, on is this an ethical shoe brand, or whatever it is, and how they've positioned coming out a lot in those answers. But you also see it massively influenced by how other people talk about that brand online, and that comes out too. So if someone's marketed themselves as a really good value brand, or a specific sustainable brand who doesn't use sweatshops, or who makes sure that everything in their supply chain is really well thought through, and they write about that a lot and they're very transparent about it, then that kind of thing actually comes through a lot in the answers in ChatGPT. And I think more and more we're seeing lots of those answers actually get sources and actually get reference links to businesses. And it's interesting, I just spent some of this afternoon looking at Dove, the soap brand that's owned by Unilever, and they have done very well in terms of a lot of what is said about them in ChatGPT, from the positioning that they've done on their pages about their ethics, their sustainability, their supply chain, what products are actually, the ingredients within the soap bars, in a way that actually they don't come across that well if you Google them and you look up things in their ingredients or whatever, because there's lots of people who have made videos about that particular soap brand. And so I think the work that a brand can do can massively impact how they're positioned in a lot of different types of search. But also I do think, and quite rightly, what people are saying about them, whether that's influencers, people on Reddit, people leaving reviews on Trustpilot and FIFO, all of that makes a difference as well.
I was just previewing an upcoming video that we're going to have out in the next week or two called How SEO Works in 2025. So some of what we're covering now, you get in more detail in that video. So make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Exposure Ninja. And in that video, Tim our founder was explaining how he was doing the same kind of search across these different platforms, and the one platform would give a really detailed response, and then he'd do it in Google, and it would just take one phrase from a very long prompt, and it would just hone in on that, and that would be all the information that you would get. He was like, I'm looking for travel advice about my family, where to go, temperatures to expect, this is the temperature I want, and so on. Google just picked up on that one bit of temperature and then ran with that, and that was it. Made no other suggestions. Whereas Perplexity and elsewhere was like, here is a whole bunch of the things you can do, and you should go at this time of year because the weather will be better, and so on. That's only going to get, that's going to increase as these models bring in this next part, which is Google calling it deep reasoning. I think maybe ChatGPT 2 Deep Seek, if you're familiar with that one, is another LLM chat thing from China. That's basically going ahead and doing thinking, which is asking like 30, 40, 50 different pages around the web, and not necessarily just what's ranking, but like just places around the web, and formulating an idea of like, these are the brands based on sentiment and based on what other people are saying on Reddit and all these different places, compared to like Google's, oh, here's a bunch of websites ranked that we know has the answer on them. It's going to change to, if you're not distributed across all of these and your brand is covered in a really well positive way, and you're owning all of those mentions, if you're not doing so, it's not going to bode well because your brand is just not mentioned at all.
It all comes back right to, actually, do you have an idea of what you want your brand and position to be in your market? And I think, bigger brands are probably really worried about this and have been really worried about this for a long time. And I think other businesses are thinking about it more and more as they're seeing, especially they're going to start seeing referral traffic coming through from ChatGPT and AI platforms. Our clients have certainly started to see that across quite a few industries, and thinking about that positioning in the same way they've thought about, their website and what they want going out in their social media messaging is now just, I think, part of the general thought around how are we branding, how are we positioning, where are we going in the market.
So it seems like there's a lot of work ahead, but it seems like there are companies already jumping on and doing the work. Like you said, big brands are already doing some of the work already. Not all of them. Some of them are slow to react because of that slow-moving ship. It's hard to turn it. But if there are more companies jumping onto this first, and we're joining the pack in the marathon, how do you kind of cut through the noise when everyone's kind of trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, I think it does come back to how you think about yourself. And I think there's a lot of successful challenger brands who have come into markets with bigger competitors and are able to do it because they're doing something slightly different. They're going after someone slightly different, or they're taking a slightly different angle. Their USPs, their values are slightly different. So I think all of those things come into it a lot. And I think at a sort of more like a more marketing level, I think there's lots of things you can do to differentiate yourself. If you're not in a really, you're not a big corporate, you're thinking, I'm not one of the most massive people in the country doing something. You can do fun things on your website that match your positioning to actually cut through the noise. So we've got a client in the mortgages space who we just built loads of cool stuff for. So I'm talking about things like mortgage calculators, loan calculators for certain types of people, interactive maps of different states in the US that will get search and will get the kinds of people that you want coming through. And that's just like a small approach of how you can be slightly more playful to cut through the noise without having to spend massive marketing budgets to, go through, you want to look like some wild rebrand or anything like that. You can actually do little things to position yourself on your website and in your marketing that can be very impactful.
There's a B2B SaaS company that I really fond of called Comsor, and their whole thing is dinosaurs. Like, their logo is a dinosaur, and there's dinosaurs everywhere. You just get all their marketing is covered in dinosaurs, to the point that they go to shows and they hand out like a Comsor Lego set, like a bespoke thing, and you enter for a raffle for it and things like that. They had Comsor Christmas printout coloring in pages, and just all the dinosaur thing just goes everywhere. But they knew that, like, it literally came from a Slack conversation. Somebody said Comsor as in dinosaur. They wrote it accidentally, or I can't remember what it was. And they were like, let's run with that. And they just ran with it. And it just makes them stand out, because every other B2B sales tool is just really boring. It's like just not really doing anything that stands out. To the point that they have tried a couple of different YouTube series, which is one was called like the Infinite Revenue Playlist, which is like a play on was it a film called The Infinite Playlist, and they were doing a twist on that, and they had a whole podcast series. They did a YouTube series called Hot Intros, where they did the Hot Ones chicken and hot sauce game, but with salespeople, so that they'd be like, cool, here, have this hot sauce, and now try and do an intro, try and do a sales intro, or answer the sales question, like just trying to add a bit more fun into a typically quite boring space in sales. I love that. I think it really cuts through.
I think that's really cool as well. And I think, if you are a brand who's positioning to be a bit more fun, then that's a great thing to do. Your example there also reminds me of like the Duolingo owl that is always going through various sorts of mass news stories. I think the owl was just killed yesterday or something quite wild happened. But I think also if you are a business who's thinking like, well, we're much more professional than this, which is totally cool and great, because that's really important, especially if you sell to other businesses, or you sell to a certain kind of person, or you're selling a certain kind of product that requires you to be like that. I think you can create the same kind of thing with your positioning through the way that you talk and tell stories about your business and why it's important, but also just through creating value. So I know I just gave the example of maps and calculators and whatever, but that can also, I think, be through like guides and how-tos and workshops and community forums, and building all of that kind of informational content up that makes a difference to your customer. And that can be part of your positioning as well, even if you're not a brand that has sort of the runway to do something that seems particularly fun or playful, or that's just not where you're going or where you want to go. I don't think that you have to. I think there's lots of ways that you can position something that feels like your business to your customer.
Do you know what? I was just listening to a podcast this morning or last night, which was by Norwegian Bank or something. It's basically a big Norwegian bank, I believe. And they started a podcast series in which they're interviewing CEOs and CXOs of important businesses, because they're like, okay, we're a fairly boring industry, but people like to hear about this stuff. So we can just do a podcast in a fun way, just like talk about the business, how it was built, and so on, how it's being run today. Like you can find a format that matches your brand that is fun, but not not unprofessional, or that still stays true to your brand principles and to your values.
That sounds absolutely brilliant example, and I think that's spot on. You don't have to have a bright green owl or a dinosaur to be a different brand. Like you can definitely just do something like that, which is the medium at which you communicate information to your audience and connect with them, which can be something that's a bit different.
Which actually takes us on to my next question, which is, which brand marketing playbooks are working today?
Good question. So I like to think of the golden triangle of brand and positioning, which is a concept that's actually from a book called Humanizing B2B, but it applies to B2C as well. And the first part of that triangle is knowing what you're selling, which it sounds obvious, but if you're a marketer, you really need to understand what you're selling, the features, the benefits, why your business is selling that. Then the second part of that triangle, or the second point, is who you're selling to. Like, what does the customer actually need, and what do they need from you? And then the last point, which is the one that I think often gets missed, is knowing how to sell it. And that's your positioning. It's the story that you're telling, but it's also the emotional connection that you're making. And sometimes I think we can get really caught up as marketers thinking about the data, which is super important because it tells us a lot of information, but then not thinking about the emotional side and actually buying decisions, even if they're B2B as well. They're often emotionally led. There's very, very few people who can buy in a purely transactional way, or who would do, even if they're making a purchase when they're at work. Like they want to make the right purchase and they want to connect with the business. They want to connect and feel like they're definitely investing their money in the right way, which sounds a bit fluffy, but I think it's actually not. It's just thinking about how you market in a way that makes someone have a certain kind of feeling, that's going to be things like not always a feeling of excitement, but sometimes it's going to be a feeling of trust, or a feeling of reliability, or a feeling of like great customer satisfaction. You know that your problem will be solved when you ring them. That kind of thing is a really important part of the golden triangle of how you actually position.
So I love that.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Sorry, I love that, because I'm thinking of the Schwartz's 5 stages of awareness, which is basically like you go from unaware to problem aware, solution aware, unaware, problem aware, solution aware, product aware, most aware. It's basically you go through all those stages, and it takes a bit of human connection. It takes a bit of like, a bit of sentiment towards a particular business to convince them to go from like, I know these solutions of CRMs are available, but I'm more aware of this particular product because of HubSpots, because of a podcast that I saw, or a call that I had at the sales demo, and the person, I really warmed to the person that was talking to me, and then they sent me a bunch of emails and guides that was like super useful, actually made me accomplish something today and make myself a better, get better marketing results. And then I'm most aware that like this is absolutely the business for me, and it's all off the back of like all those touch points, all those human connections, and different types of content.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
What else we got for us in terms of playbooks and workflows, things that are working today?
Yeah, one of the other things that I think gets overlooked a lot is real customer research. I think people say customer research, market research all the time. What they're not always thinking of is actually speaking to your customers and understanding your customers. So things like market research surveys, you're going to get not exactly what your customer thinks. And if you can speak to your customer, it's even better to then create customer personas that are based on real customers and the conversations that you've had. It can be really hard to do. And if there's blockers for you in doing that, I would say try and do things like listen to your team's call. So if you're in the marketing department, try and listen to a sales call or a customer success team's call, and try and find the customers that perhaps your salespeople are saying, these are the best kind, like these are ideal. Like when I get this kind of person, I love it. Because then you will hear similar like pain points when you actually start listening to multiple types of those calls. You're gonna find trends, and you're gonna find similarities for the most part, that then actually allow you to think, right, these are the real problems that real customers have, and how can we solve it for them? And then how can I communicate that in our marketing and in our positioning and in our brand? So I think those are probably the playbooks that work the most. And I would say the other one is actually just having a plan, which sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it's honestly so important. And many of our most successful clients, when we look at the results that they're getting, it's because they've actually made a plan for their branding and positioning, and they've worked through it before they've made a big investment, like something like a new website, or launching a big multi-channel marketing campaign, or launching their business into a new region that might have, slightly different perceptions culturally, slightly different tone of voice might apply. They've actually thought about those things, and made a plan for them. And I actually just this week was writing up 2 award entries that we're making this year for clients who had websites with us, but before that they actually went through branding and positioning with us. And honestly, the results they got, so much of it comes back to branding and positioning, which I think we always think of as something that doesn't really generate an ROI, because you can't measure it in the same way you can measure what's gone into Google Ads and what money's come out of Google Ads. It's almost that tangential part that comes before that then impacts the results of all the other marketing channels after. But when I was looking at them, one of those clients didn't really have a website before. They didn't have any leads coming through it. Their sales team was entirely focused on outbound work. So they went and they farmed their own food. They didn't have anything coming to their website. They did it all themselves off their own back through referral, which is very impressive in this world. It's quite hard to think of many businesses that wouldn't really have a website right now. And what they actually did was ask us how to position them as a B2B business. So they work in procure to pay, which basically means they sell financial efficiency solutions to other companies. So it's not the most exciting sector, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, but they wanted to market themselves more like a B2C in their business, because what they did want to do was connect with those CFOs and those finance directors. And we went through a very thorough branding and positioning process with them, speaking to some of those customers, understanding what their team cared about, and then actually going through that to bring that into their website, the way that they look, and they did have to have a very professional look because of the area that they focus in. Trust had to be really high because it's a financial purchase decision that someone's making in a business. And just that website in the first 4 months of going live got 50 leads, and 50 leads for them, those leads are worth a lot because they're other businesses buying very significant solutions globally for their operations. And it's just like, that made so much difference. But then there's an emotional difference as well. That client left us a really lovely review, and the way they spoke about their website and their brand image was talking also about how it shaped like their story and their identity as a team, and that it felt like something the people in their team really deserved and really reflected on who they are, which I think is sometimes the bit that we forget, is that the brand and position that we have as a business, it also reflects the people who work within that business as well, and they carry that with them, and they internalize that in how they think about themselves too. And I just found that one example of how actually branding and positioning work that happened probably over about a period of about 2 months was super impactful on driving results at the other side of that.
Just goes back to what we were saying before about like working so much on the business, like inside it, actually, like working inside the business, head down. I know what my strategy is. I know what my tactics are. Cool. I'm going to go out, do it, pump out stuff, whatever it is, forge connections, create partnerships, speak more, whatever it is. So basically doing that, you're like, I know what I'm selling. I'm pretty confident of the product, of what it is. I'm like, got the software, or got this, this service. But what is it about it that makes it special? I can't remember. when we put it together, when we started to put this all together, to start this journey, what was special about it? I just knew that I was really confident in it, and like, this is going to work. The people are going to like this. But what was the why?
Was that rhetorical?
Yeah, it was. It was a rhetorical question.
But I think talking about these things, like knowing your why is really important. And I also think you don't have to be breaking the mold every time. That's maybe the really important point, is you can think about doing things a little bit differently, but actually your positioning and your brand, the example we just spoke through, that's not, you're not like, this is some completely wild, off the wall, zany brand. I think if you've gone that direction, you're probably off down the garden path in the wrong direction, as we would say. And actually, you just need to think about your values, your why, and how you're showing that to your customer. And sometimes that is so much more simple than you think. It's just creating something that works for them, that visually they understand who you are, they understand the values of the business, they understand the service they're going to get, and they know what the next step is for them when they come to a website.
We've done maybe 5 or 6 episodes of this short series about strategy, talking about how to put them together, and really just trying to be helpful and give people actionable information. But this is the one occasion where I think it's actually worth shouting out something that we offer. There's something called the Branding and Positioning Accelerator, and I want to shout out because I'm so proud of the work that our team has done on some of these for some of these campaigns. Like the one you were just talking about at the end there about like shaping our identity was off the back of this accelerator. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just expanding a little bit about what that is and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched a branding and positioning accelerator about 2 years ago now. And that was because, as I mentioned earlier, we saw this problem with our clients coming in and not knowing how to position in their market, or not being positioned in a compelling way. And there's a lot of fluffiness when it comes to branding that I don't think needs to exist. Our branding and positioning work is very ROI focused. And we realized that in a much shorter period of time, a 6 to 8 week period, we could take a business through a branding and positioning refresh that works with what they've already got and understands their customers, to then create a brand and positioning that is going to get more successful results from their marketing. So that's essentially what the Branding and Positioning Accelerator does. And it goes through a process of customer call research. We actually ring their customers and we speak to them to understand them. And then we take all of that information to make trends. We create a positioning framework through lots of competitor analysis in their market. We look at how they're positioning already, what those customers need, and then we decide what the core pillars of how their positioning is going to be. Sometimes it also includes a bit of a brand story, depending on that business and the part of their market they're into and how much storytelling needs to come across on their website. That moves into developing the tone of voice. So the way that they want to sound, the way that they need to sound across lots of different marketing assets later. Also a brand, it's often a brand refresh, but sometimes it is branding from sort of first principles. And that's looking at, okay, what have they already got? And visually, how do we need to get there? So the output is an amazing set of brand guidelines. We have a fantastic designer who creates the most beautiful things, and she can hit so many different target audiences. It's really amazing. I think a lot of people get a huge emotional pull when they see the kind of work that she outputs, and quite rightly. And so a branding guidelines that then the business has as well. And then all of that comes together for us to be able to then say, okay, what kind of call to action, what kind of offer do we need on the website that hits this position in the market, that hits the right tone for your business, and that leads the customer and solves their pain points through that buyer journey until they actually make a purchase from you. So all of that essentially comes together in a big report that we then present, talk through, feedback, and create a final version of that. Then we feed into different parts of their marketing. So if they're having a rebrand of their website, if they're creating visuals for their ad campaigns, whatever it is, all of that comes through the website copy as well. So it's essentially like a foundational piece of work that happens before they go anywhere else in marketing.
Huge fan of our branding team, of our positioning team. I think they're doing phenomenal work. And some of the campaigns, they're not doing accelerators, but doing some of their branding positioning work as well, and tying it into the broader kind of integrated campaigns that we offer. Search first, super proud of them. But I want to take us back to Actionable. I want to help people create a strong brand marketing strategy for 2025. So, Charlie, how can we create an impactful brand marketing strategy this year?
Okay, great question. First, start with the customer. Ring some customers, 10 customers, whatever. Offer them a voucher if you need to get their time on the phone. Ask them about their pain points. Ask them about why they bought from you. Ask them if they considered anyone else, why they hesitated, what they really care about. Find out why they liked you as a business. That's really, really important. The other thing you can also do is just grab all of the reviews that you have recently got on a third-party platform. So if you regularly get Trustpilot reviews, for example, and ask ChatGPT for you, summarize what people say about my business in these reviews, what they like about it. That really helps you to nail your positioning when you're going through it. Figure out what your business cares about. So if you're the marketing manager, that might be speaking to your boss to understand like where you're going as a business and what's important. Because as I sort of said earlier, like people don't just want to buy from you, they want to buy into you, and they want to understand like what this business is doing and what this business values and cares about and the messages that you should be putting out. And from there, once you've got all of that foundational stuff, and you can have a look at your competitors as well, you probably should, to see what they're doing. That's when you can build out just a couple of assets that you need. Your brand story just needs to be a paragraph. You don't need to overcomplicate it with, it's not a novel. Positioning framework. What are our pillars of how we're positioning? What are the values that we're putting out? You can only have 3 to 5 because people can't take in any more than that information. Your brand guidelines, your tone of voice, and then finally just designing a CTA and an offer for your website, a call to action that's going to be really compelling, but that is also operationally possible for you, which is why marketing has to work with product and sales teams, something that you can actually deliver to your customer. So not every business, for example, is going to be able to offer every lead that comes through a free demo, but they might be able to offer them a short qualifying call, a free discovery call upfront, and then they might be able to offer a free demo to certain demographics of qualified leads after that. Or that might be like an impossible thing that you can't do. We've had a client where actually the volume of leads was too high. And in the end, we started with a very simple form, And lots of people didn't realize in this one that they needed a certain credit score in order to go through this. And we had to create a much longer 8-step form so that the leads that were coming through to the sales team were really qualified. So when you're working on the CTA and the offering, this is not just marketing thinking up like, okay, I've got a really cool idea. Like, it needs to work for the business. So you can start with a really cool idea and then you have to find something that operationally works. And so I think all of that, those are the basic principles of how you create an impactful branding and positioning strategy. And I think the other really important thing to say is like, don't overcomplicate it. There's a little bit of blue sky thinking involved. That's what's fun about it. But actually, what you create should support all of your other marketing channels to drive revenue to the business, because it's the right voice, the right image, the right offer for the people that you're marketing to.
And how do we bring the marketing part into it, the amplification, the megaphone? How do we, once we've got all that sorted out, we've done our SWOT analysis against competitors, we're very confident in what we've got, and the people, how do we get out into the market and let people know?
Oh, this is a great question. There's probably multiple podcasts that could come off the back of this. I think if you're the marketing person in the business, or even if you're the business owner and you've been working on this and you think, right, I've got this, I've got my brand guidelines, my tone of voice, I know the positioning, then I think you need to look at how do you filter that through into your marketing channels. The first one is always going to be your website. What does your website say? Does it sound like you? Does it look like you? And sometimes that does mean you need a whole redesign. Sometimes it's not that drastic, and actually you could do it by tweaking the text that you've already got, rewriting your most important pages to sound more like you, and then the same pretty much for everything else, the content that you put out. So if you are working in a business where there's other people in your marketing team, actually sharing with them and bringing them on the journey of what you're doing and what this needs to look like. So if they're a copywriter, they really need to understand all of the stuff that you have just created and who they're writing to, so that comes through in the writing. If you've got someone who is doing ads for you, understanding that needs to come through in the ad copy, understanding, we're going to have certain kinds of images because these are the target customers we're going after. They're going to be images that they recognize themselves within or that appeals to them, and do some of that, test some of that as well. And all of it should come together. So there's going to be a buy-in stage if you've got lots of stakeholders. If you don't have too many stakeholders, like lucky you, now is a great time to get it done while there's not too many people in the business, because when you bring more people in, you're going to have to take them through the process of learning and explaining that and getting into marketing. And if you work with a marketing agency and you've already got this kind of stuff, one of the most impactful things you can do is early on be like, right, here is everything that we've got, and brief them on it, and then also take their feedback on it, because an outside perspective always so valuable on these kinds of things. And if you put something out there and you're like, I don't think it's working, that is okay. Just tweak it as you go until you do get something that is working for the kind of customers that you want to get. And then actually, I had one other point, which I think is really next level to all of this stuff, Dale, and it's something that you talk to me about often, which is around community building and how you really amplify bigger and bigger beyond where, you've got the website done, social media ads, they all look really good. You feel like the content you're producing sounds like your brand voice. I think community stuff is probably the next level from there.
Yeah, and I imagine a lot of people will be thinking community sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, it is a lot of work. However, there are different ways that you can do it. Through you can have an owned community, so something that you're running, and obviously that takes a lot of work, but it doesn't have to start off with a huge thing. You don't have to have a Slack community. It can literally just start off with a WhatsApp group. Like, I joined a WhatsApp group the other day for somebody who's a growth marketing specialist with an SEO background, and they just put all of their research when they're putting all of their notes together for their newsletter. Here's some interesting stuff that I found this week that's not going to make it in the newsletter, or just for you to read in the meantime. I'm going to drop it in here and we can have a discussion about it, or this might just be useful for you. And that's a very basic way, just getting things out the door. Like, you can invite your segment in, like customers, invite them first into a WhatsApp channel. Any questions you have about this particular thing, you can ask them in here and we'll help you out. Other people in the group who've been through that can help you out as well. but that's a very simple version. You can then go into like earned, so you can go into a community and kind of earn your earn your awareness by just being a really present member and sharing information and just being really valuable to people. And then it's like borrowed, so a borrowed community is like one you pay for, essentially. Like you sponsor it, you pay to be a guest speaker or put on a special AMA or Ask Me Anything or a webinar. There's like lots of different versions you can do it, and you can, again, like you said before, respond to what happens there, be agile, do one thing. Is it effective? Okay, tweak it. Let's see if that works. Do we feel like we could expand it, scale it? Cool, let's make that change now. You don't have to be like going up and pitching to the board, right, I want to build a community. It's cost us £150,000, and you can just start with something small. And if it's not effective, you've not lost anything. And sometimes that's the best work you can do, is just to start with a tiny segment, test out language. So we went to the B2B Marketing Expo in November, and we were talking about generative engine optimization, which is our ability to get businesses appearing in ChatGPT and Perplexity and places like that. The language doesn't resonate because the marketers there are like, I don't know what that is. So you start to test different things. So we talk about AI SEO. Does that make sense? No, it's not resonating with people. Cool. We, in one couple of days, a few days in an event, spoke to people, our ideal kind of market, tested out the language and found that doesn't work. Cool. We're not going to make all of our marketing about that one thing. And I've just saved myself 12 months of communicating the wrong thing and getting no results. And you could do that too.
Yeah, I think those examples of community engagement are really good. Like a WhatsApp group, if you have an audience who are still like in Facebook, a Facebook group does the same thing. A lot of businesses use forums. I personally love forums, and I'm not sure if it's because I was born in the early 90s or why that is, but I think forums are great. And I often see as well, if you are a SaaS business or you sell B2B, Slack groups are particularly popular in that segment as well. So I think these are quite simple things that you could do. And if you're thinking like, my brand is a bit more fun than these kind of businesses that we're talking about here who might have Slack groups, then, you know, I do think there's a lot of great examples like the Duolingo owl that we spoke about earlier, or if anyone knows like the entrepreneur Grace Beverly, who create like communities on social, and they do that through like quirky storytelling or talking about their life and who they are and connecting that way. All of those kinds of things, you can do just one simple thing like that without needing to, you know, if you've already got a social media assistant or a social media manager in your business, you can work with them to decide, okay, what's the one thing that we're going to push on, probably without needing to go and get approval from loads of people, because actually they are already doing social media in the business. That is their job that you already want them doing. So it's actually just thinking maybe a little bit bigger than where you were without needing to, you know, throw loads of money into it and time.
What you should say about Slack communities, because I joined another one this week. So I'm currently in 10 different Slack communities, and one of them is our own Slack group. So I'm in Sprocketeer, which is a Slack community for people who want to learn about HubSpot, or they're a HubSpot professional and they want to get somewhere for advice. Product School for product marketers. Marketing Ops professionals for marketing operations people. Rev Genius for people who are revenue marketing focused. Superpath for people who are content marketing focused. Online Geniuses, people who just love marketing generally. Remotive for people who work remotely. Uncommon for people who want to know about social intent. So this is where if you spot that your customer engages, likes your competitor's LinkedIn profile, it pings up in Slack and tells you, so you can go out there and be like, hey client, how you doing? Is there anything you're struggling with right now? I'd love to help you. And then there's another CM World, which is the Content Marketing Institute in the US. They've got a Slack community too. I used to be in the Buffer one before they shut that down. I used to be in one called Big SEO, which is a Reddit community's SEO one as well. I think it's still running. Traffic Think Tank, which is like probably the world's biggest SEO community, was bought by HubSpot, I think, or a couple of years ago. Is filled with information. Like there are loads of communities out there, and I guarantee if there's probably a community out there that you can be a part of as a starting point. And if there isn't, opportunity, just create the community itself and just start inviting your audience in. Invite anyone who's on your contact list in. Be like, okay, let's work on this together, and how can we help you? How can this be useful, and so on. So
that was a wild list. I think it says a lot about you. I can't personally imagine being in so many Slack communities, but I think it says the importance of actually creating them, because people do want to be involved. You're going to be carrying a Slack tote bag and then socks with all of these branded different Slack communities on them soon.
Oh yeah. You can go with my Semrush socks. With Semrush, if you are listening, I've only got the old logo version now, so I need a new pair of socks. Thanks.
Okay. I also wear some Semrush socks if we're toting the socks.
Excellent. Well, hopefully that's been helpful to people, and they have a better understanding of branding, positioning, and marketing, how they all tie together for a complete brand marketing strategy for this year. If you are curious how you can get the very most out of your marketing this year, and if you need some advice or maybe some feedback on your branding or positioning, feel free to reach out to us at exposureninja.com. We'll be able to book you in with a call with one of our expert marketing consultancy ninjas who will talk you through how we can help you and get you some advice straight out of the blocks, and then we'll see where that goes. If you have enjoyed this series, you can find a playlist of maybe 6 or 7 episodes at this point linked in the podcast notes. That'll be exposureninja.com/podcast. And if you want to hear more from us, you can reach us in 2 weeks' time. We're doing another live one on February 27th, which we're going to be talking about digital PR strategies as well, with Charlie once again and our head of content marketing, Abby Daunton-Johns, who's been on once before. Cool. Any final words, Charlie?
No, I think that's everything. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks all, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care.